Lucy had always believed that one day her stories would find an audience. For now, though, she was an aspiring writer juggling unfinished manuscripts in a tiny rented cottage at the edge of a quaint town where she hoped to unearth fresh inspiration. The house itself was endearing in a creaky, worn way. The floorboards groaned with each step, and the drafty attic served as her improvised writing nook. Each morning, Lucy perched by a broad window, coffee steaming beside her, determined to fill blank pages with something meaningful. Yet every day, doubt tested her optimism, leaving her pages as bare as the branches of a wintered tree. Whenever her creativity stalled, she found her gaze drifting outside to the untamed garden next door. There, a tall, wiry older man tended plants with unwavering care, trimming leaves, turning soil, and propping drooping stems. He never looked her way, or if he did, it was so brief that Lucy couldn't be certain. Nevertheless, she felt curious, and soon that curiosity grew into a quiet tug on her heart. One late afternoon, Lucy decided a walk might help disentangle her writer's block. She strode across her tiny yard and found herself at the fence bordering the neighbor's property. From that vantage, the garden looked more vibrant and more mysterious than she had realized. The man worked steadily, wearing overalls stained with dirt. He seemed as much a part of the garden as the roses or sunflowers, grounded, resolute, and dedicated. Before she could talk herself out of it, Lucy called out a tentative hello. He paused and turned, acknowledging her with a nod so subtle that it felt almost imagined. Gathering her nerve, she stepped through a narrow gate she hadn't even noticed before, stepping onto soft, freshly turned soil. Up close, the fragrance of the garden surrounded her, fresh mint, damp earth, and the faint sweetness of honeysuckle. She introduced herself, voice quivering slightly. The man met her gaze with an inscrutable expression and, after a moment, gave his name, William. He did not offer a handshake or volunteer more details about himself, yet he allowed her to remain. She asked a few gentle questions about the flowers, unsure if he thought her nosy. He answered calmly, if sparingly, naming each plant with a soft, methodical pride. Something in him, Lucy decided, reminded her of a closed book, possibly full of exquisite stories, but not yet ready to be read. The more Lucy looked, the more life she saw springing up in careful rows and clusters, lettuce shining in neat green heads, sunflowers towering like watchful sentinels, clusters of herbs that sent perfume breezes across the yard. Amid all this controlled chaos, she noticed a worn wooden crate stashed in a corner. Its splintered sides and rusted nails suggested it had been there for decades, perhaps even half buried by time. William paid it delicate attention, though never openly. Every so often, his gaze flicked there, and his shoulders darted upward with tension. Lucy couldn't guess what significance it held, and he certainly did not offer any explanation. When she gently praised the tranquility of the space, William only nodded and continued weeding. Sensing his reluctance to talk further, Lucy decided to leave well enough alone that evening. Even so, her mind churned with questions she was eager to explore on her notebook's fresh pages. In the following days, Lucy found herself drawn to the serenity of that hidden green world. More often than not, she would carry her worn leather notebook to a rickety bench at the back of William's plot. She was careful not to intrude on his work, yet her presence became a small part of the daily rhythm. She would write, he would tend his plants, and when one of them remembered the other was there, they'd exchange the briefest remarks, comments about the weather, a new bloom, or the needs of a fledgling seedling. Over time, Lucy ventured questions about how to choose the right soil, what depth to plant seeds, or how to handle talkative crows pecking at fresh sprouts. William responded simply, yet poetically. He'd press his calloused fingers into the soil, explaining that seeds need warmth and darkness before pushing their way to the light. Lucy began translating his guidance into lessons for her stalled stories, reminding herself that new ideas also needed the right environment to thrive. His knowledge fed not only her curiosity about gardening, but also her desire to craft something meaningful on paper. Little by little, Lucy realized William spoke most authentically through action rather than conversation. One afternoon, he wordlessly handed her a packet of snapdragon seeds, guiding her to a plot of overturned earth. She sank onto her knees, following his instructions on spacing and depth. As she arranged each small seed, the idea crossed her mind. Every seed contained a silent narrative, a hidden potential that could become something vibrant if nurtured properly. The thought struck her deeply. Wasn't that precisely what she hoped to do with her unfinished manuscripts? That evening, Lucy's writing table bore the fruits of her musings. She wrote a scene about a long forgotten seed chest, carefully mapping out parallels between planting seeds in hope and creating stories from the germ of an idea. She held back from pressing William further about the old wooden crate, though curiosity throbbed at the edge of her thought. Before long, Lucy's new sense of purpose brought renewed life to both the garden and her pages. Summer arrived, spreading warm light across the small town. The local newspaper announced a short story contest, and Lucy felt a surge of excitement and dread swirl together. She decided to submit a piece about how a single nurturing moment, whether in the garden or out in the wider world, could transform a life. She thought she might weave in bits of William's quiet wisdom, though she did not dare mention him by name. Determined to do justice to his spirit, she revisited the garden each day, polishing her paragraphs after each intangible lesson he offered. But as the date to submit her entry approached, the weather took a menacing turn. Thick clouds rolled in, unleashing a sudden storm. The wind howled ferociously and electricity crackled across the blackened sky. Lucy rushed out to help William protect the fragile young plants. Rain pelted them, soaking Lucy's hair and trickling down her back. She could hardly hear William's directions over the roar of thunder. Yet they moved in tandem, covering rows with tarps and anchoring fences with rope. The storm raged well into the night, and Lucy thought of no storyline except the desperate one unfolding before her. Morning broke in a quiet hush, revealing broken stems, toppled trellises, and scattered clumps of uprooted blossoms. Lucy woke with muscles screaming from the effort of fighting wind and rain until near midnight. Steeling herself for the worst, she ventured outside, expecting devastation. Instead, she found a garden that was battered but standing. William crouched by a half-snapped tomato plant, supporting its broken stem in his palm. His gentleness, born from days and years caring for delicate seedlings, was heartbreakingly tender. She knelt beside him, helping to brace the plant with a makeshift stake. He spoke only 2 words, "Thank you," yet the depth of gratitude in his voice moved Lucy. In that instant, they both knew there was something rooted between them that went beyond polite neighborliness. It felt like a bond forged in damp soil and thunderstorms, a quiet understanding of the fragility all living things share. As Lucy straightened and looked around, she recognized that the battered garden, surviving against the odds, reflected her own perseverance in writing. She resolved to finalize her story for the contest, newly invigorated by witnessing nature's tenacity and William's unwavering dedication. Once the garden began to recover, Lucy found the will to refine her manuscript. She stayed up late, lost in the glow of her desk lamp, testing out perfect phrasing that would do justice to the themes of care, resilience, and silent growth. When the story felt complete, she decided she wanted William to read it, to see how his influence had sprouted in her words. Gathering the printed pages into a simple folder, Lucy walked out into a bright, sweltering day and found William resting in a bit of shade beneath an old oak. He sat quietly, letting soil fall through his fingertips in a repetitive motion, as if searching for something intangible amid the grains of dirt. She offered him the folder, explaining that it was a piece she'd written, inspired largely by the garden. He opened it gingerly, eyes flicking up toward hers with uncertainty. Lucy worried he might reject it outright, claustrophobic at the shift from solitude to collaboration, but he accepted the folder with a respectful nod. Days passed, and nerves gnawed at Lucy. Had he read it? What did he think? Eventually, William offered it back to her in that same quiet manner, remarking, "I liked it. Reminds me of some things. Things I've kept locked up for too long, I guess." He indicated the crate, adding that perhaps he'd let her see what lay inside one day. Lucy's short story entered the contest soon after. Though a ripple of fear told her it might vanish among countless other entries, she waited with guarded hope. Meanwhile, she and William continued sharing daily tasks in the garden. Then, one airy afternoon, William surprised her by beckoning her to the far corner, where the wooden crate stood. He lifted the lid painstakingly, as if unveiling a sacred relic. Inside were small linen pouches tied with faded ribbons, each labeled in neat script handwriting. Morning Glory's 1947, read one. Another was Zinnia's 52. Gently untying one pouch, William let seeds spill into his palm. They were tiny, scarcely more than flecks of brown and gray, but he handled them as if holding precious stones. His voice quavered as he explained these belonged to his grandmother, a woman who believed that each seed was a tiny container of hope. She'd once run a community garden that united neighbors, forging more friendships than differences. William, it seemed, had let these seeds lie dormant after a series of personal losses drove him into isolation. But something in Lucy's presence had reawakened his desire to honor that legacy. Together, they decided to plant the heirloom seeds in a specially prepared bed. Days became weeks as Lucy helped clear weeds, enrich the earth with compost, and assemble a small trellis against which the vines could climb. With each scoop of soil, they unearthed fragments of William's memories. She listened as he described summer afternoons spent chasing tadpoles in a creek, childhood nights where his grandmother taught him to listen to moths on the window, and an older life that had slipped away from him one heartbreak at a time. As the seeds nestled into the ground, Lucy marveled that so many years of dormancy had not robbed them of the capacity to sprout. She felt a kinship in that resilience, recalling how her own stories had languished, lone and unread in dusty notebooks. Yet here they both were, coaxing sleeping seeds into new beginnings. To Lucy's astonishment, the local contest not only recognized her piece, but offered to publish it in the town newspaper. Thrilled and terrified, she was invited to read it aloud at the modest local library. Though she was certain William preferred his hermit-like existence to public events, she mustered the courage to let him know when and where it would happen, leaving the choice to him. On the day of the reading, Lucy scanned the small group of attendees, a mere cluster of friendly faces. Her nerves settled when she caught sight of William near the back. He lingered against the wall, thumbs hooked into his overalls, as if he had slipped away from his soil just long enough to support her. Buoyed by his presence, Lucy read with unwavering conviction, shaping each sentence as carefully as she might have tended a vulnerable seedling. When she finished, she was met with kind applause. Catching William's eye, she noted a faint gleam of pride in his gaze. Even from a distance, it felt like a tangible gift. They returned to the garden at twilight, the horizon blazing pink and orange. In the corner plot, freshly sprouted seedlings from the grandmother's heirloom seeds welcomed them. William and Lucy knelt together, marveling at the first tender leaves. Tiny morning glory tendrils curled around a small trellis, promising a tower of blossoms by dawn. William spoke in low tones, admitting he had nearly given up on these seeds and on many things long ago. Lucy responded that it was never too late to plant something new, whether in fertile soil or on an empty page. A hush settled between them, comforting and unspoken, and acknowledging all that was shared. Lucy told him she felt as if each bud was narrating a new piece of his grandmother's story, resurrecting the hope that had once brought neighbors into a communal haven. Lucy said that she wanted to write a story if the ground was already burned. It was calling her to come. William seemed to weigh her words. "Every seed has a story, Lucy," he whispered. "Sometimes all they need is a chance to take root." The seasons glided onward, shifting the garden's palette from vibrant summer hues to the crisp reds and golds of fall. Lucy's notebooks filled with new characters and arcs inspired by the plants and their unstoppable drive to bloom. Though her days were busier, she began receiving small invitations to speak about her story or to write another piece. She relished the peaceful, nurturing power of the garden more than ever. Often she'd catch William examining the plants at nightfall, gently scattering mulch or tying vines to supportive stakes. One evening, as their shadows grew long across the lawn, he commented unassumingly that Lucy might expand her short piece into a collection. The seeds in the crate were plentiful, after all, each pouch a doorway into more stories. Lucy smiled, realizing how far he had come in trusting her. She knew how meticulously he had guarded these seeds, and the fact he was willing to let her sow them anywhere, even on paper, was a testament to their growing bond. With William's blessing and encouragement, Lucy assembled a small anthology of stories, each tale interwoven with the garden's lessons of patience, healing, and revelation. When the volume was released, it garnered modest praise throughout the town, and people recognized the gardener in her stories as the quiet man who had always kept to himself. Though William still cherished his privacy, he allowed Lucy to honor his grandmother, to write truthfully of the seeds that slept so long until nurtured into brilliant blooms. On a crisp autumn morning, Lucy woke early and hurried to the garden. She found Willem just finishing with a row of fading sunflowers, carefully gathering seeds from their giant heads to store for next year. He looked up with a genuine warmth in his eyes, acknowledging both Lucy and the miracle of life unfolding in the ground. The bop of a hummingbird drifted through the air, and Lucy felt a hush settle over her heart. She remembered the dedication she'd written in the front of her anthology. A note to William's grandmother, and to anyone who had ever placed hope in something buried unseen. Silently, she thanked William, knowing her journey from uncertain, aspiring author to published writer had run parallel to the seed's path. From dark dormancy to the bright surface. She thought about the battered tomato plant that survived the storm, the morning glory stretching daily toward the sky, and each tiny seed that had once seemed insignificant but held entire worlds within. And she realized that her story, like William's, was still unfolding. Reaching for the notepad she carried, Lucy jotted down a single line: one more seed of creativity ready to sprout. We plant dreams in dark soil, trusting they will rise toward the sun. With that, she and William exchanged a wordless smile, tending to the garden where each bud, leaf, and flower continued to grow, page by page, season by season, living, breathing promises of stories yet to be told.